oftentimes when people kick out attitude, what they're saying is, A, I can't get to my goal and I want to defend myself from being hurt. So they make all this boisterous stuff. And as helpers, sometimes we get confused with that stuff and we don't look for the goal. We get caught up in the gorilla dance. Right? So as helpers, we need to be clear about that in our own self. And when we are focused on our goals, when we move towards our goals, Stephen Covey talks about being proactive. And I would like to say, when we're moving away from our goals, we're being reactive. So what is it that should be driving all the decisions that we help people make? Goals. Goals. Now, here's the trick. As practitioners, we are professional. We have the research, we have the schooling, we have the knowledge. So we know what people's goals should be. But what people's goals should be and what people want their goals to be may not necessarily be the same thing. All right? So we're going to talk about those, how those become quote unquote sins, if you will. Does this make sense so far? All right, cool. I know some of you have heard parts of this before, but I am the same person, so I'm going to keep doing some of the same things. So I just want to put that out there. So we strive to be, in terms of cultural competence, right? And you'll hear that in the workplace. You'll hear it in the community. We strive to, there are agencies and organizations that start out on the low end of this, which is cultural destructiveness, where they actually seek to destroy a culture. And we're always trying to move to cultural, advanced cultural competence, where we don't have to say, I have a black friend. We're comfortable enough with the black friend that we have that we don't have to say that we got one, right? So, but in between there is this piece called cultural blindness that organizations try to operate from. And they say that we are not biased, we are objective. I was meeting with a police officer and we were talking about racial profiling, and I have some opinions on racial profiling. I don't know that it's necessarily a bad tool. I think it is a bad tool when it's the only tool. But we talked about this cultural blindness, and I said, do you think this happens in your profession? And he said, no, I don't think so, because we're all professionals. I said, really? I said, professionals at what? He said, professional policemen. I said, oh. I said, do you have any professional people? Do you have any people who are good at being a person first, and then what you do second? And he was kind of stumped. But our organizations like to say we are objective. We treat everybody the same. We're fair. When in fact, is that the case? No. Our policies may seem as though they go across the board, but the people who created them had a specific thing in mind. And I also want to tell you that organizations are designed to fulfill their mission at all costs. So what does that mean for each and one of us? What's that?
We're secondary.
We're secondary. The organization is going to live first. So organizations don't take care of people. Organizations take care of what? Themselves. Who takes care of people? People. And the organization take care of people. All right? So, just wanted to talk about that just for a second. That's the over outline and blah, blah, blah. When people don't get access, when they don't get the organizations that actually serve them, they start to create their own. And they start to mobilize on their own. And so the next few slides are going to talk about that, and then I'll get to the sins. All right? So, first of all, every social movement, small and large, that has made the world a more just and hospitable place has been animated by active respect for human identity and integrity. Typically, these movements have unfolded in 4 stages. And this is from Parker Palmer. If you are not familiar with Parker Palmer, it is a life mandate that you become associated with Parker Palmer. He is a He's actually grown into other things, but he's a Quaker, and he deals a lot with wholeness and how people need to first be whole themselves before they can help someone else. And so what he talks about are these four ways in which people who have been disenfranchised from organizations try to mobilize. First, they mobilize by being sick and tired of being sick and tired. So they get to a point where individuals reach a point where the gap between their inner and outer lives becomes so painful that they resolve to live divided no more, right? So people resolve to say, my life can be better. I know it can be better. I'm tired of the way it is, so let's move and let's do something. In terms of Adlerian principles, what do we call that?
Movement.
We call it movement.
A felt minus to a perceived plus.
Yes, a felt minus to a perceived plus, right? And so when people get sick and tired, so when can you help somebody? When they're sick and tired of being sick and tired, right? Number 4, they start to form communities, whether functional or dysfunctional, because they're trying to achieve a goal, so they surround themselves with like-minded people that will help them achieve their goal, whatever that goal is. They gather support. They go public with their values and visions in order to gather more support. So they'll say, this is how we are. Or in the case of, I taught high school, we had loner kids who would stand together and say, we're all loners. Do you get that? Right? Yeah. Fourth, then they try to garner or they get moral leverage because they have a critical mass and they appeal to higher moral values. They're able to actually make systemic change happen. All right? So let's get to the 7 deadly sins. First is the maternal and paternalistic attitudes that organizations typically have. Second, we think that we know more than the person that we're trying to help. The more we look, the more we find. We are the government and we're here to help. We get paid off of poverty. Many of our organizations get paid off of poverty. We don't challenge systems that we know are unjust or unfair. And lastly, we beat people up with the rules. All right? So, we'll talk a little bit about this. So, a lot of our organizations are built on the premise that the people who are coming to us are broken. And that we have the answers to fix them, or we have to caretake for them. Now, people will often ask, well, Andre, how does this apply to vulnerable adults? Right? Don't we have to take care of them? Shouldn't we have a paternal or maternal approach when working with them? So I'll ask you the question. For vulnerable adults and vulnerable people, do we have an obligation to protect them? Yes, we have an obligation to protect them. That obligation does not mean that we have to be maternal or paternal. What's the difference between those two terms? Are people familiar with those two terms? Maternal means what? Motherly, right? And nurturing. And in this context, I mean it in a negative way. It is not always meant in a negative way in other contexts. But in this particular context, I mean that in a negative way. That we become too nurturing to the fact that people can't develop themselves. Or paternalistic, meaning that we become so that we mandate to people what their goals should be. And so what happens when we tell people what their goals should be? What is their natural reaction? Rebellion. So we push and they naturally what? Push back. All right? So that's their natural reaction. And also we take away people's responsibility. One of the things that I think is so interesting in social services is that when we have a family who's having some difficulties, one of the things that happens is that children are taken out of the home. And in some cases that needs to happen. I don't think in all cases that needs to happen. Because what happens when we take the kids out of the home?
You can't
fix the home because it's not fully functional with the people that are in it creating the problems.
So the people who are in it that are creating the problems can't function together, but what else? You become the paternal or the maternal object, but then the people who should be raising these kids have a free day. Woo! I'm up in the club now. Hey, I haven't been a teen in all these years, and so now my children are gone. So, is there any real inclination to necessarily get that level of responsibility back? No. Until people are sick and tired of being sick and tired, and then also until they understand that they need to be healed. And so, and so there are no rewards for taking back responsibility. Who wants more responsibility? Anybody? Please raise your hand if you want more responsibility than you already have. Oh, go ahead, girl. Go ahead. I got something for you too. All right. So there's that. We say that we know more, and because we are professionals, and I believe that we need to have knowledge about things, but we need to have knowledge to help facilitate someone else's change, right? Apple trees do not grow apples for themselves. They don't brag to other apple trees. Apple tree, I got 17,000 apples. And the other one's, oh, I only got 300 apples, right? That fruit is produced to do what? To feed somebody else, right? To give out to somebody else. And there is a difference between knowing the path and walking the path. So I can read about poverty all day long. But until I've had an experience with poverty, I can't say that I know what you're going through. I may be able to understand or empathize, but I can't say that I know, because there's a difference between knowing the path and actually walking it. The more you look at a thing, the more you find. We had a situation when I worked at Anoka County where we were doing an intervention with a family, and so the parent actually reached out to the county and said, "Do you have any services or coaching that you can do with our family, because we want to? There's some things we got to work out." And so what did the county say? Sure, right? Sure. So they got a social worker on the case. The social worker came and looked at the family and said, "Okay, yeah, we got some services. You need to do this, this, and this." And so the parents said, "Okay." And so they started this process. And then the social worker said, "Oh, you missed this. So let me get some more services so you can get that." So they went and got some more services. And so another set of service providers came in, looked at the situation, looked at the family, and said, "Oh, you did this, this, and this. Oh, but you missed this. So I have another set of services that we can offer you so that we can get you this." Now, the whole time, the parent came to us for help. And now we're complaining as the system that the parent is being detached from the thing that they were asking for help. And why? Because every time we looked at this family, we saw more and more what? Problems. And the more that we look at that, the more we, as professionals, can see those problems. And we also are looking at deficit approaches. What's wrong with this family, as opposed to what are the family's strengths, right? I want you to think about another cultural group and the stereotypes that people say about that group, right? So they're drunks, they're thieves, they're unemployed, they're blah, 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 blah. Now I want you to search your family tree for those same things. Do you have a drunk in your family? You don't have to answer this, right? Do you have a thief in your family? Do you have a person that doesn't work in your family, right? At the same time, I would not necessarily say to you that those people are, or that your family does not have strengths. I would say that your family does have strengths, and we need to pay more attention to that than we do the deficits. You love some of those family members not because of their weaknesses or their deficits, but you love them because of the strengths that they have. You're able to overlook and help them overcome some of those deficits because of the care that you have for them. We are the government. We're here to help. And I mentioned this before. Systems are developed and designed to benefit who?